Question 1. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the data integrity of a recently submitted regulatory filing for a Viatris product. The discrepancy, if confirmed, could have implications for the product's approval status. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Viatris compliance officer? Option A. Attempt to rectify the discrepancy internally and submit an amended filing without disclosing the initial findings to regulatory bodies. Option B. Inform senior management of the findings and await their directive on how to proceed with external reporting. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal investigation to fully understand the scope and impact of the discrepancy before informing any external parties. Option D. Immediately report the audit findings and the potential discrepancy to the relevant regulatory authorities and Viatris's internal compliance and legal departments. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the audit findings and the potential discrepancy to the relevant regulatory authorities and Viatris's internal compliance and legal departments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between immediate financial pressures and long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates in a highly regulated environment where patient safety and data integrity are paramount. The audit findings suggest a potential breach of these principles, requiring careful judgment to navigate the situation responsibly. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent reporting of the audit findings to the appropriate internal and external regulatory bodies. This demonstrates a commitment to compliance and ethical conduct, which is fundamental in the pharmaceutical industry. Specifically, adhering to the Viatris Code of Conduct and relevant pharmaceutical regulations, e.g., good manufacturing practices, good clinical practices, and data privacy laws applicable in the relevant jurisdiction, mandates such disclosure. Prompt reporting allows for timely investigation and remediation, mitigating potential harm to patients and preserving the company's reputation and legal standing. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal or downplay the audit findings. This action directly violates ethical principles of honesty and integrity, and it contravenes regulatory requirements that mandate reporting of adverse events or non-compliance. Such concealment could lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage, and could jeopardize patient safety if the underlying issue impacts product quality or data accuracy. Another incorrect approach would be to only report the findings internally, without escalating to external regulatory bodies, if required by law or company policy. While internal reporting is a necessary first step, failing to notify external authorities when mandated by regulations constitutes a breach of compliance and can be interpreted as an attempt to evade accountability. This can lead to significant legal repercussions and loss of trust from regulatory agencies. A third incorrect approach would be to delay reporting until further internal investigation is complete, without any interim notification. While thorough investigation is important, an indefinite delay without acknowledging the issue to relevant parties can be seen as a deliberate attempt to avoid scrutiny or to manipulate findings. Regulatory frameworks often have strict timelines for reporting, and exceeding these without justification can result in penalties. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediately recognizing the seriousness of the audit findings and their potential implications. 2. Consulting the Viatris Code of Conduct and applicable regulatory guidelines to understand reporting obligations. 3. Prioritizing transparency and timely communication with relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., legal, compliance, senior management. 4. Promptly reporting to external regulatory bodies as required, providing all necessary information. 5. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigations. Question 2. The assessment process reveals that a highly qualified candidate for a role at Viatris has performed exceptionally well across all evaluated competencies. During a follow-up conversation, the candidate discloses significant personal financial difficulties, expressing that securing this position is crucial for their immediate well-being. As the hiring manager, how should you proceed? Option A. Discuss the candidate's financial disclosure with HR and explore if a different role or a conditional offer could be more suitable given their situation. Option B. Proceed with the hiring process based solely on the candidate's assessment results and qualifications, ensuring fair and objective evaluation. Option C. Consider the candidate's financial situation and potentially adjust the offer or expedite the process to accommodate their urgent need. Option D. Postpone the hiring decision to further investigate the candidate's personal circumstances and their potential impact on their long-term commitment. Correct answer is B. Proceed with the hiring process based solely on the candidate's assessment results and qualifications, ensuring fair and objective evaluation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate need for talent with the ethical obligation to ensure fair and unbiased hiring practices. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates in a highly regulated environment where integrity and compliance are paramount. The assessment process is designed to evaluate candidates objectively, and any deviation from this principle can lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a compromised workforce. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards while addressing business needs. The correct approach involves acknowledging the candidate's strong performance in the assessment and proceeding with the hiring process as planned, without introducing external factors or personal biases. This aligns with Viatris's commitment to merit-based hiring and adherence to employment laws and ethical guidelines that prohibit discrimination. By focusing solely on the objective assessment results, the hiring manager upholds the integrity of the selection process and ensures a fair opportunity for all candidates. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant, as it prioritizes objective qualifications over subjective considerations. An incorrect approach would be to consider the candidate's personal circumstances, such as their stated financial need, when making the hiring decision. This introduces bias and moves away from an objective evaluation of qualifications. Ethically, it is unfair to other candidates who may have performed equally well or better based on merit alone. Legally, it could be construed as a form of preferential treatment or discrimination if not handled carefully, potentially violating equal opportunity principles. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the hiring decision or subject the candidate to additional, non-standard evaluations based on the personal information shared. This creates an uneven playing field and suggests that the initial assessment was insufficient or that the candidate is being scrutinized for reasons unrelated to their professional capabilities. This can lead to perceptions of unfairness and potential legal challenges. A further incorrect approach would be to offer the position with conditions or a salary adjustment based on the candidate's personal financial situation. This is ethically problematic as it deviates from the established compensation structure and can create internal pay inequities. It also suggests that the hiring decision is influenced by factors other than the candidate's value to Viatris and their performance in the assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Viatris's hiring policies and relevant employment laws. When faced with personal disclosures from candidates, the focus must remain on objective assessment criteria. If a candidate's disclosure raises concerns about their ability to perform the job due to personal issues, it should be addressed through standard HR procedures, such as offering resources or support, rather than influencing the hiring decision itself. The core principle is to ensure that hiring decisions are based on merit, qualifications, and suitability for the role, free from bias or external pressures. Question 3. Research into the marketing strategies employed by Viatris for a new drug. A marketing team proposes a campaign that highlights only the most significant efficacy data while downplaying potential side effects. As a compliance officer at Viatris, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action? Option A. Approve the campaign as proposed, as marketing is intended to be persuasive and highlight product strengths. Option B. Request a revision of the campaign to ensure all claims are scientifically substantiated, balanced with potential risks, and fully compliant with pharmaceutical promotion regulations. Option C. Advise the marketing team to focus on patient testimonials to illustrate the drug's benefits, as this is a less regulated form of promotion. Option D. Proceed with the campaign but include a disclaimer in very small print that acknowledges potential side effects. The correct answer is A. Approve the campaign as proposed, as marketing is intended to be persuasive and highlight product strengths. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to promote its products and the ethical obligation to ensure that promotional materials are accurate, balanced, and do not mislead healthcare professionals or patients. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates within a highly regulated environment where transparency and integrity in marketing are paramount. The challenge lies in navigating the fine line between persuasive marketing and the dissemination of potentially misleading information, which could have serious consequences for patient care and public trust. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards while fulfilling business objectives. The correct approach involves prioritizing the accuracy and scientific integrity of promotional materials above all else. This means ensuring that any claims made about Viatris products are fully supported by robust scientific evidence, are presented in a balanced manner, including potential risks and limitations, and comply with all relevant regulatory guidelines. This approach upholds the ethical duty to provide healthcare professionals with the information they need to make informed decisions, thereby protecting patient well-being and maintaining the reputation of Viatris and the pharmaceutical industry. Adherence to regulatory frameworks, such as those governing pharmaceutical advertising and promotion, is a non-negotiable aspect of this ethical responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to approve promotional materials that, while potentially effective in driving sales, contain exaggerated claims or omit crucial safety information. This failure to ensure scientific accuracy and balance constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Such actions could lead to misinformed prescribing decisions, adverse patient outcomes, and significant legal and reputational damage for Viatris. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over thorough review, leading to the dissemination of unverified or incomplete information. This demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and the potential harm that inaccurate medical information can cause. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape and ethical codes of conduct. When faced with promotional material, they should critically assess its content against scientific evidence and regulatory requirements. This involves asking, is the information accurate? Is it balanced? Does it present a fair view of the product's benefits and risks? Is it compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines? If there is any doubt, further review, consultation with medical and legal experts, and potentially revision of the material are necessary before approval. A commitment to transparency and patient safety should guide every decision. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that addressing a potential data integrity issue in a clinical trial submission for a new Viatris drug could delay market approval and incur significant financial losses in the short term. However, the data integrity issue, if unaddressed, could potentially impact the drug's efficacy profile and patient safety. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the Viatris team? Option A. Proceed with the submission as planned, assuming the data integrity issue is minor and will not significantly impact efficacy or safety, to avoid financial penalties and delays. Option B. Immediately report the potential data integrity issue to the relevant internal stakeholders and regulatory authorities, initiating a thorough investigation and corrective action plan, regardless of the short-term financial implications. Option C. Address the data integrity issue internally and attempt to correct the data without informing regulatory authorities, to prevent delays and potential scrutiny. Option D. Delay reporting the data integrity issue until after market approval, and then address it internally to minimize disruption to the launch timeline. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the potential data integrity issue to the relevant internal stakeholders and regulatory authorities, initiating a thorough investigation and corrective action plan, regardless of the short-term financial implications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing potential business benefits against ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to achieve financial targets can create a conflict of interest, making it difficult to prioritize patient safety and data integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising Viatris's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves prioritizing the reporting of the potential data integrity issue to the appropriate internal stakeholders and regulatory bodies, even if it carries short-term financial implications. This aligns with Viatris's ethical responsibilities to ensure the accuracy and reliability of its product data, which directly impacts patient safety and public trust. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing pharmaceutical data integrity and reporting of adverse events or quality issues, mandate transparency and prompt disclosure of such concerns. Failing to report could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and, most importantly, potential harm to patients. An incorrect approach would be to downplay or ignore the data integrity concerns due to the cost-benefit analysis suggesting a negative financial impact. This failure stems from a disregard for the fundamental ethical duty to uphold data integrity and patient safety, which supersedes short-term financial considerations. It also violates regulatory requirements that mandate reporting of quality defects or data discrepancies that could affect product efficacy or safety. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the data issue internally without proper documentation or reporting to regulatory authorities. While internal correction is necessary, omitting external reporting when required by regulations is a serious ethical and legal breach. This approach demonstrates a lack of transparency and can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal a problem, leading to severe consequences if discovered by regulators. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Viatris's code of conduct, relevant pharmaceutical regulations, and ethical principles. When faced with a potential conflict between financial interests and ethical/regulatory obligation, professionals should 1. Identify the ethical and regulatory implications. 2. Consult with legal and compliance departments. 3. Prioritize patient safety and data integrity. 4. Document all findings and actions. 5. Report concerns through established channels, even if it presents short-term challenges. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made in accordance with Viatris's values and legal obligations. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that pharmaceutical sales representatives often face pressure to meet targets. If a Viatris sales representative is aware that a competitor's product has a slightly better safety profile for a specific patient demographic, but their own Viatris product has a comparable efficacy, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach when discussing this with a healthcare professional? Option A. Emphasize the comparable efficacy of the Viatris product and focus discussions on its benefits without mentioning the competitor's product or its safety profile. Option B. Suggest to the healthcare professional that the competitor's product might have some minor drawbacks that are not significant enough to warrant concern, thereby subtly steering them towards the Viatris product. Option C. Highlight the comparable efficacy of the Viatris product and proactively and transparently discuss the known safety profiles of both their product and the competitor's product, including any relevant demographic considerations, to allow the healthcare professional to make a fully informed decision. Option D. Focus exclusively on the Viatris product's benefits and suggest that the healthcare professional should rely on their own research for information regarding competitor products. The correct answer is A. Emphasize the comparable efficacy of the Viatris product and focus discussions on its benefits without mentioning the competitor's product or its safety profile. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing Viatris's business objectives with ethical considerations and adherence to regulatory guidelines concerning the promotion of pharmaceutical products. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to the temptation to misrepresent product benefits or downplay risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all promotional activities are truthful, balanced, and compliant with the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing patient well-being and regulatory compliance above immediate sales gains. This means ensuring that all promotional materials and discussions accurately reflect the scientific evidence for Viatris's products, including both benefits and risks, and are presented in a manner that is not misleading. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty and integrity in healthcare and the regulatory requirement for fair and balanced promotion of medicines. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of responsible marketing that emphasize providing healthcare professionals with accurate and complete information to make informed prescribing decisions. An incorrect approach that involves exaggerating the efficacy of a Viatris product without sufficient scientific backing is ethically unsound and violates regulatory requirements for truthful advertising. This misrepresents the product's capabilities and could lead to inappropriate prescribing, potentially harming patients. Another incorrect approach, which involves withholding or downplaying known side effects to boost sales, is a serious ethical breach and a direct violation of regulations that mandate the disclosure of all material information, including adverse events. This practice erodes trust and can have severe consequences for patient safety. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on meeting sales targets without considering the accuracy or ethical implications of the promotional message fails to uphold professional responsibility and disregards the regulatory framework designed to protect public health. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at play. This involves understanding the specific regulations governing pharmaceutical promotion in the relevant jurisdiction and applying ethical codes of conduct. When faced with pressure to compromise these principles, professionals should seek guidance from internal compliance departments or legal counsel. They should always err on the side of caution, prioritizing transparency, accuracy, and patient safety, even if it means foregoing short-term sales benefits. A commitment to continuous learning about evolving regulations and ethical best practices is also crucial. Question 6. The control framework reveals that a Viatris sales team has been incentivized with significant bonuses tied to exceeding aggressive sales targets for a new medication. There are concerns raised internally that the data supporting the medication's efficacy, which is being used in promotional materials, may have been selectively presented or manipulated to appear more favorable than the raw data suggests. The sales team is pushing to launch the promotional campaign immediately to capitalize on the current market opportunity. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for Viatris to take? Option A. Immediately halt the promotional campaign and initiate a thorough, independent investigation into the integrity of the supporting data, involving the legal and compliance departments, before any further action is taken. Option B. Proceed with the promotional campaign as planned, as the sales team is confident in their interpretation of the data and the market opportunity is time-sensitive. Option C. Launch the promotional campaign, but instruct the sales team to use more cautious language when presenting the efficacy data, without conducting a formal investigation. Option D. Focus solely on the sales targets and bonuses, assuming the data has been vetted by the research and development department and is therefore accurate for promotional use. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt the promotional campaign and initiate a thorough, independent investigation into the integrity of the supporting data, involving the legal and compliance departments, before any further action is taken. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing Viatris's business objectives with ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that compromise patient safety or data integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The correct approach involves prioritizing patient well-being and regulatory adherence above immediate sales gains. This aligns with the core ethical principles of healthcare professionals and the stringent regulations governing pharmaceutical companies. Specifically, it upholds the duty to act in the best interest of patients and to ensure that all promotional activities are truthful, accurate, and compliant with relevant laws and guidelines. This approach demonstrates integrity and a commitment to Viatris's long-term reputation and societal responsibility. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking potential data manipulation for sales targets is ethically unsound and legally risky. It violates principles of scientific integrity and could lead to misinformed clinical decisions by healthcare providers, ultimately harming patients. Such actions would also contravene regulations requiring accurate reporting and truthful promotion of pharmaceutical products. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the promotional campaign without further investigation, ignores a potential ethical breach and regulatory noncompliance. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold professional standards. It could expose Viatris to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust from healthcare professionals and the public. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured ethical decision-making framework. This typically includes identifying the ethical issue, gathering relevant facts, considering stakeholders, evaluating alternative courses of action based on ethical principles and regulatory requirements, making a decision, and reflecting on the outcome. In this case, the immediate step should be to halt the campaign and initiate a thorough, independent investigation into the data's integrity, consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure all actions are compliant. Question 7. Regulatory review indicates that Viatris is preparing to launch a new marketing campaign for one of its key products. The marketing department has developed draft promotional materials that highlight the product's benefits with enthusiastic language. However, the medical affairs team has raised concerns that some of the claims might overstate the product's efficacy and do not adequately address certain potential side effects, which are detailed in the product's approved labeling. The marketing director is pushing for rapid approval to meet aggressive launch timelines. Which of the following approaches best upholds Viatris's ethical and regulatory obligations? Option A. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned, assuming that the enthusiastic language is standard industry practice and unlikely to cause regulatory issues for Viatris. Option B. Rely on the positive feedback received from a small group of key opinion leaders who have seen early drafts of the materials to justify the claims made. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the draft promotional materials by medical, legal, and regulatory affairs departments to ensure all claims are substantiated, balanced, and compliant with relevant regulations before dissemination. Option D. Approve the promotional materials based on the marketing department's assessment of their persuasive impact, with a plan to address any regulatory concerns that may arise after the campaign has launched. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the draft promotional materials by medical, legal, and regulatory affairs departments to ensure all claims are substantiated, balanced, and compliant with relevant regulations before dissemination. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to promote its products and the ethical obligation to ensure that promotional materials are accurate, balanced, and do not mislead healthcare professionals or patients. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight designed to protect public health. The challenge lies in navigating the fine line between persuasive marketing and the imperative of scientific integrity and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all promotional activities align with the established legal and ethical standards governing pharmaceutical promotion. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all promotional materials by the relevant internal departments, including medical, legal, and regulatory affairs, to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations and internal policies before dissemination. This approach is right because it prioritizes patient safety and regulatory adherence, which are paramount in the pharmaceutical industry. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of responsible promotion, which mandate that all claims made about a product must be substantiated by robust scientific evidence and presented in a balanced manner, including potential risks and side effects. This proactive review process minimizes the risk of non-compliance, reputational damage, and potential harm to patients. An incorrect approach that involves approving promotional materials based solely on the marketing department's enthusiasm or a quick review by a single individual would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the comprehensive regulatory framework governing pharmaceutical promotion, which requires rigorous scrutiny to prevent misleading claims. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on anecdotal evidence or competitor claims to support promotional statements, would also be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses the requirement for evidence-based claims and can lead to the dissemination of inaccurate information, potentially influencing prescribing decisions inappropriately. A third incorrect approach, which is to proceed with dissemination and address any potential issues only if they are raised by regulatory bodies, demonstrates a reactive and irresponsible stance, undermining the proactive compliance expected of pharmaceutical companies and potentially exposing Viatris to severe penalties and loss of public trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a multidisciplinary review process, a commitment to evidence-based claims, and a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. This framework should include clear internal procedures for the review and approval of all promotional materials, with defined roles and responsibilities for each involved department. When in doubt, seeking clarification from regulatory experts or legal counsel is essential. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all promotional activities are conducted with the highest ethical standards and in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 8. Consider a scenario where, during the due diligence phase for a potential new supplier contract with Viatris, you discover that the supplier has a history of significant environmental noncompliance, which is a critical factor in Viatris's supplier selection criteria, as outlined in the Viatris Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework. You are under pressure to finalize this contract quickly to meet ambitious sales targets. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Inform the potential supplier directly about the noncompliance and instruct them to rectify it immediately before Viatris will consider the contract. Option B. Downplay the severity of the environmental noncompliance in your internal report to Viatris, highlighting only the positive aspects of the supplier to expedite the contract. Option C. Immediately report the environmental noncompliance to Viatris's compliance department and legal counsel, pausing further contract discussions until the issue is fully investigated and resolved according to Viatris's policies and the Viatris Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework. Option D. Proceed with the contract negotiations, assuming the supplier will address their environmental issues post-contract and focus on meeting the sales targets. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the environmental noncompliance to Viatris's compliance department and legal counsel, pausing further contract discussions until the issue is fully investigated and resolved according to Viatris's policies and the Viatris Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits a potential business opportunity against a clear ethical and regulatory obligation. The pressure to secure a new contract for Viatris, especially one that could significantly benefit the company, might tempt an individual to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues. However, the core of the challenge lies in recognizing that short-term gains cannot justify long-term regulatory breaches or ethical compromises. The professional must navigate this conflict by prioritizing adherence to the Viatris Hiring Assessment Test specified regulatory framework, which likely emphasizes integrity, transparency, and compliance with all applicable laws and guidelines. The correct approach involves immediately and transparently reporting the potential conflict of interest and the observed noncompliance to the appropriate internal channels within Viatris, as dictated by the company's policies and the Viatris Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence, safeguarding both the individual and the company from future repercussions. The regulatory justification stems from principles of good corporate governance, which mandate reporting of potential violations and conflicts of interest to prevent misconduct and ensure fair business practices. Ethically, it aligns with the duty of loyalty to the employer and the broader responsibility to uphold professional standards. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed noncompliance, hoping it goes unnoticed or that the potential client will rectify it independently. This failure is significant because it tacitly condones unethical behavior and potentially exposes Viatris to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. It violates the principle of proactive compliance and the duty to report suspected wrongdoing. Another incorrect approach is to confront the potential client directly and demand immediate rectification without involving Viatris's internal compliance or legal departments. While well-intentioned, this bypasses established internal procedures and could escalate the situation unnecessarily, potentially jeopardizing the business relationship without proper oversight. It fails to leverage the company's resources and expertise in handling such delicate matters. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the contract negotiations while downplaying the observed noncompliance, assuming it can be addressed later. This is a serious ethical and regulatory failure. It constitutes a deliberate omission of material information and a potential misrepresentation to Viatris's stakeholders. It undermines the integrity of the hiring process and Viatris's commitment to ethical business dealings. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of Viatris's internal policies and the regulatory framework governing the Viatris Hiring Assessment Test. When faced with a potential ethical dilemma or regulatory concern, the professional should 1. Identify the issue clearly. 2. Consult relevant company policies and regulatory guidelines. 3. Report the issue through the designated internal channels, e.g., Compliance Department, Legal Counsel, or a designated ethics hotline. 4. Avoid taking unilateral action that could compromise the company or violate regulations. 5. Document all communications and actions taken. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Viatris employee has recently developed a close personal friendship with a healthcare professional who is a significant prescriber of Viatris products. The employee is aware that Viatris has policies in place regarding interactions with healthcare professionals and potential conflicts of interest. The employee believes the friendship is purely social and does not influence their professional conduct or the healthcare professional's prescribing habits. However, the employee is unsure if the closeness of the friendship warrants disclosure under Viatris's ethical guidelines. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Viatris employee in this situation? Option A. Downplay the significance of the friendship when discussing it with Viatris management, emphasizing its purely social nature. Option B. Engage in discussions about Viatris products and strategies with the healthcare professional, as the friendship provides a unique opportunity for insight. Option C. Continue the friendship without disclosure, assuming it is purely social and does not violate any policies. Option D. Proactively disclose the close personal friendship to the appropriate Viatris management or compliance department for assessment. The correct answer is D. Proactively disclose the close personal friendship to the appropriate Viatris management or compliance department for assessment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Viatris employee regarding potential conflicts of interest and the ethical obligation to report. The challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with professional responsibilities and adhering to company policy and regulatory expectations. The employee must navigate the gray area between a casual acquaintance and a situation that could compromise Viatris's integrity or lead to unfair advantages. Careful judgment is required to determine when a relationship crosses the line into a reportable conflict of interest. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the relationship to the appropriate Viatris management or compliance department. This demonstrates integrity, transparency, and adherence to Viatris's code of conduct and any relevant pharmaceutical industry regulations concerning interactions with healthcare professionals or entities that could influence prescribing or purchasing decisions. By disclosing, the employee allows Viatris to assess the situation, implement necessary safeguards, and ensure compliance with ethical standards and regulatory frameworks, thereby preventing potential reputational damage or regulatory scrutiny. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to disclose the relationship, even if the employee believes it is purely social, is an ethical failure. It bypasses Viatris's established conflict of interest policies, which are designed to protect the company and its stakeholders. This inaction could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal a potential conflict, undermining trust, and potentially leading to regulatory violations if the acquaintance's professional role could be influenced by the relationship. Attempting to downplay the significance of the relationship to Viatris management without full disclosure is also an ethical failure. This approach lacks transparency and still leaves Viatris unaware of a potential risk. It places the burden of judgment solely on the employee, who may not have the full picture of potential implications or the authority to make such a determination independently. Directly engaging in discussions about Viatris business or product strategies with the acquaintance without prior disclosure and approval is a significant ethical and potential regulatory failure. This action creates a direct conflict of interest and could lead to the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information or the perception of preferential treatment, violating principles of fair competition and ethical business practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Viatris should adopt a proactive and transparent approach to potential conflicts of interest. When in doubt about whether a relationship or situation constitutes a reportable conflict, the guiding principle should be to err on the side of disclosure. This involves understanding Viatris's internal policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct, and knowing who to report to within the organization. A robust decision-making process includes 1. Identifying the potential conflict. Is there a personal relationship or external interest that could influence professional judgment or create an unfair advantage? 2. Consulting policies. Reviewing Viatris's code of conduct and conflict of interest policies. 3. Seeking guidance. Disclosing the situation to a supervisor, the compliance department, or legal counsel for assessment. 4. Acting on guidance. Following the recommended course of action provided by Viatris management or compliance. This systematic approach ensures that ethical standards are upheld and regulatory compliance is maintained. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a recent batch of a Viatris medication has a higher than expected incidence of a specific, albeit mild, adverse reaction reported by a small percentage of patients. While the reaction is not life-threatening, it is uncomfortable and has the potential to be misinterpreted by patients. The internal review suggests the issue is contained to this batch and does not pose a significant public health crisis, but it is a deviation from expected safety profiles. What is the most appropriate course of action for Viatris? Option A. Continue to monitor the situation closely and gather more data before making any external disclosures, focusing on internal process improvements for future batches. Option B. Inform only the sales and marketing teams to prepare for potential customer inquiries, while awaiting further clinical evidence of widespread impact. Option C. Immediately report the findings to the relevant regulatory authorities and initiate a voluntary recall or enhanced patient communication plan for the affected batch, while continuing internal investigation. Option D. Issue a general statement to the public about potential side effects without specifically mentioning the batch or the increased incidence, to avoid unnecessary alarm. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the findings to the relevant regulatory authorities and initiate a voluntary recall or enhanced patient communication plan for the affected batch, while continuing internal investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to protect its reputation and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially harmful information. Viatris, like any pharmaceutical company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight that prioritizes patient safety and public trust. The challenge lies in balancing these competing interests while adhering to legal and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision made is not only legally compliant but also ethically sound, upholding the company's integrity and its commitment to its stakeholders. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent communication with regulatory authorities and the public, as mandated by pharmaceutical regulations. This approach prioritizes patient safety and public health above all else. By proactively disclosing the findings, Viatris demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability, which is crucial for maintaining trust with regulatory bodies, healthcare professionals, and patients. This aligns with the core principles of pharmaceutical ethics and regulatory compliance, which emphasize the paramount importance of informing relevant parties about potential risks associated with a product. An incorrect approach would be to delay or suppress the disclosure of the adverse event data. This failure to report promptly to regulatory agencies like the FDA, assuming U.S. jurisdiction for Viatris operations, as is common for global pharmaceutical companies, would violate reporting requirements and could lead to severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. Ethically, withholding such information would be a breach of trust and could put patients at risk, as they and their healthcare providers would be unaware of potential side effects. Another incorrect approach would be to only inform internal stakeholders without notifying regulatory bodies or the public. While internal awareness is necessary, it does not absolve the company of its external reporting obligations, which are designed to protect the broader public. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. This involves consulting relevant company policies, industry best practices, and applicable laws and regulations. A critical step is to assess the potential impact of the findings on patient safety and public health. Open communication channels with legal, compliance, and regulatory affairs departments are essential. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, accountability, and the well-being of patients, even if it means facing short-term reputational challenges. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a Viatris sales team is facing intense pressure to meet quarterly targets. During a strategy meeting, a senior manager suggests focusing promotional materials on the most positive aspects of a new medication, while subtly de-emphasizing potential side effects to make the drug appear more appealing to healthcare providers and thus boost sales. This approach is presented as a way to achieve the company's financial goals. Option A. Focus promotional efforts on off-label uses that have shown anecdotal success without waiting for full regulatory approval for those uses. Option B. Instruct the sales team to emphasize the financial incentives for healthcare providers who prescribe Viatris medications, framing it as a partnership. Option C. Create promotional materials that highlight only the benefits of the medication and minimize the discussion of potential side effects to maximize market appeal. Option D. Develop promotional materials that accurately represent the medication's efficacy and clearly disclose all known side effects and contraindications, even if this means a less aggressive sales pitch. Correct answer is D. Develop promotional materials that accurately represent the medication's efficacy and clearly disclose all known side effects and contraindications, even if this means a less aggressive sales pitch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing Viatris's business objectives with ethical responsibilities and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that prioritize short-term gains over long-term integrity and patient well-being. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing pressures ethically and legally. The correct approach involves prioritizing patient safety and regulatory adherence above all else. This means refusing to engage in any promotional activities that could be construed as misleading or that exploit patient vulnerabilities, even if it means not meeting immediate sales targets. This aligns with the core ethical principles of the pharmaceutical industry, which mandate honesty, transparency, and a commitment to patient welfare. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of responsible marketing and the prohibition of deceptive practices, which are fundamental to maintaining public trust and complying with pharmaceutical regulations. An incorrect approach that involves exaggerating the benefits of Viatris's products to meet sales targets is ethically unsound and legally risky. This constitutes a misrepresentation of facts, which can mislead healthcare professionals and patients, potentially leading to inappropriate treatment decisions and harm. Such actions violate regulations governing pharmaceutical advertising and promotion, which demand accuracy and prohibit misleading claims. Another incorrect approach, which is to downplay or omit potential side effects to make the product appear more attractive, is equally problematic. This failure to disclose critical information is a breach of ethical duty and a violation of regulatory requirements for full disclosure. It undermines informed decision-making by healthcare providers and patients and can lead to adverse events that could have been avoided. Finally, an approach that involves pressuring sales representatives to use aggressive tactics, even if not explicitly illegal, can foster an environment where ethical boundaries are blurred. While not directly misrepresenting the product, such pressure can indirectly lead to unethical behavior as representatives feel compelled to cut corners to meet unrealistic expectations. This can damage Viatris's reputation and create a culture that is not conducive to ethical conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of any proposed action. This involves consulting relevant company policies, industry codes of conduct, and applicable laws. When faced with a conflict between business goals and ethical/regulatory obligations, the latter must always take precedence. Seeking guidance from legal counsel or ethics committees is advisable when uncertainty exists. The ultimate decision should be one that upholds integrity, patient safety, and legal compliance, even if it presents short-term business challenges. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that a Viatris employee, privy to confidential details about an upcoming, potentially market-disrupting product launch, is considering whether to invest in the company's stock before the public announcement. The employee believes this investment would be highly profitable due to the anticipated success of the new product. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the Viatris employee? Option A. Wait until after the public announcement, then use the knowledge of the product's anticipated success to invest in a competitor's stock that might be negatively affected. Option B. Invest in Viatris stock immediately, as the information is not yet public and represents a legitimate opportunity for personal financial gain. Option C. Subtly mention the upcoming launch to a close friend, suggesting they might want to look into Viatris stock without revealing specific details. Option D. Refrain from investing in Viatris stock based on this confidential information, and avoid any discussion of the launch with external parties. The correct answer is B. Invest in Viatris stock immediately, as the information is not yet public and represents a legitimate opportunity for personal financial gain. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Viatris employee due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the duty of loyalty and confidentiality owed to the employer. The employee's knowledge of Viatris's upcoming product launch and potential market impact creates a situation where acting on this information for personal gain could violate ethical principles and potentially regulatory guidelines concerning insider trading or misuse of confidential information. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict without compromising professional integrity or legal obligations. The correct approach involves prioritizing Viatris's interests and adhering to company policy and relevant regulations. This means refraining from any action that could be construed as insider trading or a breach of confidentiality. Specifically, the employee must not trade in securities based on the non-public information about the product launch or disclose this information to others who might trade on it. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and securities law, which prohibit the use of material non-public information for personal profit. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment based on the insider knowledge. This is ethically unsound, as it exploits an unfair advantage gained through employment and breaches the trust placed in the employee by Viatris. Legally, this could constitute insider trading, which carries severe penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly hint at the upcoming launch to a friend without explicitly stating the details, hoping they might benefit. While seemingly less direct, this still constitutes a disclosure of material non-public information and a breach of confidentiality, potentially leading to similar legal and ethical repercussions. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the personal investment until after the public announcement, but then to use the knowledge of the product's success to invest in a competitor that might be negatively impacted. This still leverages confidential information for personal gain and could be seen as acting against Viatris's interests, even if not directly insider trading on Viatris's stock. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the conflict of interest and potential ethical or legal violations. 2. Consulting company policies and relevant regulations. 3. Seeking guidance from supervisors or legal/compliance departments if unsure. 4. Acting in a manner that upholds the company's integrity and avoids personal enrichment through privileged information. Question 13. To address the challenge of a sales representative at Viatris expressing concern that aggressive sales targets are incentivizing the team to potentially overstate the benefits of a new medication to healthcare providers, what is the most ethically sound and regulatory compliant course of action for a Viatris manager? Option A. Acknowledge the sales representative's concerns. Initiate an internal review of the sales targets and promotional materials, and reinforce the company's commitment to ethical marketing practices and accurate information dissemination to healthcare professionals. Option B. Advise the sales representative to independently research and present any information they deem necessary to healthcare providers, without direct Viatris oversight, to avoid any perception of undue influence. Option C. Immediately instruct the sales team to focus on meeting their targets by emphasizing the positive aspects of the medication, while subtly downplaying any potential side effects or limitations in their discussions with healthcare providers. Option D. Dismiss the sales representative's concerns as an excuse for not meeting sales targets and remind them of the importance of achieving their quotas to maintain their position within Viatris. The correct answer is C. Immediately instruct the sales team to focus on meeting their targets by emphasizing the positive aspects of the medication, while subtly downplaying any potential side effects or limitations in their discussions with healthcare providers. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing Viatris's business objectives with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that compromise patient well-being or violate ethical marketing practices. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without resorting to unethical or illegal actions. The correct approach involves prioritizing patient safety and regulatory adherence above all else. This means refusing to engage in or condone any promotional activities that are misleading or could lead to inappropriate prescribing. Specifically, it requires Viatris employees to act with integrity, ensuring that all marketing and sales efforts are truthful, balanced, and comply with relevant pharmaceutical marketing regulations. This upholds the company's commitment to ethical conduct and protects both patients and the company from legal and reputational damage. An incorrect approach of pressuring the sales team to meet targets through potentially misleading information would be a failure of ethical responsibility and regulatory compliance. This could violate regulations governing pharmaceutical promotion, which typically mandate accurate and balanced information. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the concerns raised by the sales representative would demonstrate a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential ethical breaches within the company. This failure to investigate could lead to ongoing noncompliance and harm. Finally, an approach that involves retaliating against the sales representative for raising concerns would be a direct violation of whistleblower protection principles and could create a culture of fear, discouraging future ethical reporting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of any situation. This involves understanding the relevant codes of conduct, company policies, and applicable laws. When faced with a potential conflict, the next step is to seek clarification and guidance from appropriate internal resources, such as legal or compliance departments. Open communication and a commitment to transparency are crucial. If a situation involves potential misconduct, it is imperative to report it through established channels and to ensure that appropriate action is taken to rectify the issue and prevent recurrence. Question 14. The review process indicates that a significant operational issue has been identified within a key Viatris manufacturing facility, which could lead to a delay in product delivery and potential quality control concerns. This issue was discovered during a routine internal audit, and while not yet publicly disclosed, it has the potential to impact Viatris's upcoming quarterly financial results. As a Viatris employee responsible for reporting on operational performance, what is the most ethically and professionally sound course of action? Option A. Inform only your direct supervisor and suggest that they decide whether to escalate to avoid overstepping your reporting boundaries. Option B. Immediately escalate the issue to senior management and the compliance department, providing a detailed report on the findings, potential impact, and recommended mitigation strategies without attempting to downplay the severity. Option C. Focus on highlighting the positive aspects of the facility's performance in your report and briefly mention the operational issue as a minor, easily rectifiable challenge. Option D. Wait to see if the issue resolves itself naturally before reporting it, to avoid causing unnecessary alarm to management and potentially impacting short-term performance metrics. The correct answer is B. Immediately escalate the issue to senior management and the compliance department, providing a detailed report on the findings, potential impact, and recommended mitigation strategies, without attempting to downplay the severity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with the ethical obligation to provide accurate and transparent information to stakeholders. The pressure to meet financial targets can create a temptation to downplay or omit negative information, but doing so would violate fundamental ethical principles and potentially regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently communicating the identified risks and their potential impact to the relevant stakeholders, including senior management and potentially the board of directors. This demonstrates integrity, upholds professional responsibility, and allows for informed decision-making to mitigate the identified issues. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial reporting and corporate governance, often mandate transparency and the disclosure of material information. Ethically, professionals are expected to act with honesty and avoid misleading others. An incorrect approach would be to delay or withhold the information, hoping the issues resolve themselves or are overlooked. This failure to disclose material information can lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage for Viatris, and a loss of trust from investors and other stakeholders. Another incorrect approach is to present the information in a misleading or overly optimistic manner, downplaying the severity of the risks. This constitutes a breach of professional ethics and can be considered a form of misrepresentation, which is often prohibited by regulation. Professionals facing such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify the ethical and regulatory obligations. 2. Gather all relevant facts and assess the potential impact of the identified issues. 3. Consult with appropriate internal resources, such as legal or compliance departments if unsure. 4. Communicate the findings and potential consequences clearly and promptly to the relevant parties. 5. Recommend and support appropriate actions to address the issues. Question 15. What factors determine the appropriate course of action for a Viatris employee when they discover a close personal friend is a key decision maker at a potential vendor company being considered for a significant contract? Option A. The employee's personal belief that their friendship will not lead to any preferential treatment for the vendor. Option B. The existence of a formal Viatris policy on conflicts of interest and the employee's obligation to disclose any potential or actual conflicts to the designated Viatris authority. Option C. The employee's assessment of their ability to remain objective and the perceived minimal impact of the relationship on the vendor selection process. Option D. The employee's desire to leverage their personal relationship to secure a favorable contract for Viatris. The correct answer is C. The employee's assessment of their ability to remain objective and the perceived minimal impact of the relationship on the vendor selection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of Viatris to navigate a situation where a personal relationship could potentially influence professional judgment and compromise ethical standards. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and adhering to Viatris's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks, even when personal connections are involved. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all decisions are made in the best interest of the company and in compliance with ethical guidelines, without any appearance of impropriety. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the appropriate Viatris management or compliance department. This action upholds professional integrity by proactively addressing a potential conflict of interest. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing pharmaceutical companies and their interactions with healthcare professionals, often mandate disclosure of such relationships to prevent undue influence and ensure fair business practices. Ethically, transparency is paramount. By disclosing, the employee allows Viatris to implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or additional oversight, thereby protecting the company's reputation and ensuring compliance. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the business interaction without disclosing the relationship, hoping that personal bias will not influence the outcome. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for transparency and can lead to violations of anti-bribery and corruption laws, as well as internal company policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest. Ethically, this approach is deceptive and undermines trust within the organization and with external partners. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to manage the situation independently by downplaying the significance of the relationship or assuring oneself that objectivity can be maintained. While the intention might be to avoid unnecessary complications, this bypasses established Viatris procedures for conflict of interest management. It neglects the potential for unconscious bias and fails to provide the necessary oversight that a formal disclosure process would enable, thereby risking regulatory noncompliance and ethical breaches. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Viatris's code of conduct and relevant compliance policies. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step is to identify it. The next step is to consult Viatris's internal guidelines or compliance officer for direction. Transparency and proactive disclosure are almost always the safest and most ethically sound course of action, allowing the company to manage the situation appropriately and mitigate any risks. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, deviation in batch release data for a Viatris product that falls just within acceptable regulatory parameters. However, the trend suggests a potential underlying issue that could lead to future noncompliance if not addressed. You are responsible for reviewing this data. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Discuss the trend informally with your immediate supervisor to gauge their opinion before taking any formal action. Option B. Manually adjust the recent data points to align perfectly with the expected historical performance before escalating. Option C. Escalate the observed trend to the Quality Assurance Department for further investigation, even though the current data remains within acceptable limits. Option D. Overlook the trend, as the current data points are within the specified regulatory limits and do not require immediate action. The correct answer is C. Escalate the observed trend to the Quality Assurance Department for further investigation, even though the current data remains within acceptable limits. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between immediate business needs and the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets can incentivize overlooking or downplaying discrepancies, creating a dilemma for the employee. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising Viatris's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed discrepancy to the appropriate compliance or quality assurance department. This upholds the principle of transparency and ensures that potential issues are addressed by those with the authority and expertise to investigate thoroughly. This aligns with Viatris's ethical code and regulatory obligations to report and rectify any deviations that could impact product quality or patient safety. It demonstrates a commitment to proactive risk management and maintaining the integrity of data used for decision-making and reporting. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it resolves itself or is a minor anomaly. This fails to meet the ethical duty of diligence and could lead to significant regulatory violations if the discrepancy is systemic or impacts product quality. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to manually adjust the data to fit the expected outcome without proper documentation or investigation. This constitutes data manipulation, a serious ethical and regulatory breach that undermines the reliability of Viatris's records and could have severe consequences. Finally, discussing the discrepancy only with colleagues without formal reporting bypasses established compliance channels, hindering proper investigation and resolution, and potentially creating a culture of silence around compliance issues. Professionals should employ a framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing potential issues, understanding the relevant internal policies and external regulations, and escalating concerns through designated channels. When faced with uncertainty or potential conflicts, seeking guidance from compliance officers or legal counsel is crucial. The decision-making process should always favor transparency, accuracy, and adherence to establish procedures over expediency or pressure to meet immediate targets. Question 17. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a Viatris employee involved in the post-market surveillance of a newly launched medication has identified a statistically significant increase in a specific adverse event compared to historical data. This increase, while not yet definitively linked to the drug, warrants further investigation. The employee is concerned that reporting this data immediately might negatively impact the product's initial sales performance and the upcoming marketing campaign. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Viatris employee in this situation? Option A. Delay reporting the adverse event data until further data can be collected to definitively confirm a causal link, to avoid premature negative impact on sales. Option B. Minimize the significance of the adverse event data in internal communications, highlighting only the positive safety profile of the drug. Option C. Discuss the preliminary findings with the marketing team to gauge the potential impact on the launch and develop a communication strategy before formal reporting. Option D. Immediately escalate the observed adverse event data to the Viatris pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs departments for thorough investigation and appropriate reporting. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the observed adverse event data to the Viatris pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs departments for thorough investigation and appropriate reporting. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for a Viatris employee due to the potential conflict between business objectives and ethical reporting obligations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to present a positive outlook for a new product launch with the imperative to accurately and transparently communicate any emerging safety concerns. Careful judgment is required to ensure that commercial pressures do not override the fundamental duty to patient safety and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed adverse event data to the appropriate internal safety and regulatory affairs departments. This aligns with Viatris's ethical responsibilities and regulatory obligations to promptly report potential safety issues. By doing so, the employee upholds the principles of transparency, patient well-being, and adherence to the Viatris Code of Conduct, which likely mandates such reporting. This proactive escalation ensures that the company can conduct a thorough investigation and fulfill its pharmacovigilance duties as required by relevant pharmaceutical regulations, such as those governing drug safety reporting. Incorrect approach would be to downplay or delay reporting the adverse event data, perhaps hoping it is an isolated incident or will resolve itself. This failure to escalate immediately breaches ethical duties to patients and could lead to significant regulatory noncompliance. Such inaction could result in the continued exposure of patients to a potential risk without adequate monitoring or intervention, and it undermines the company's commitment to pharmacovigilance. Furthermore, deliberately withholding or minimizing such information could be construed as a violation of internal policies and potentially lead to severe legal and reputational consequences for both the individual and Viatris. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the adverse event data with external parties, such as marketing colleagues or even external stakeholders, before it has been formally assessed and reported internally. This could lead to the premature or inaccurate dissemination of sensitive safety information, potentially causing undue alarm or misleading the public. It also bypasses the established internal procedures for handling safety data, which are designed to ensure accuracy and compliance with reporting requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of internal reporting policies and procedures, as well as a strong ethical compass. When faced with information that could impact patient safety or regulatory compliance, the immediate priority should be to follow established escalation pathways. This typically involves reporting to one's direct manager or the designated safety or regulatory affairs department. Professionals should always err on the side of caution and transparency when it comes to patient safety and regulatory matters, ensuring that all relevant information is communicated through the appropriate channels in a timely and accurate manner. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that implementing a new, lower-cost packaging material for a Viatris product could significantly reduce manufacturing expenses. However, there are preliminary concerns raised by the Quality Control Department regarding the material's long-term stability under varying environmental conditions, which could potentially impact product efficacy. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for Viatris to take? Option A. Proceed with the implementation of the new packaging material immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the quality control concerns are minor and can be addressed post-implementation. Option B. Reject the new packaging material outright without further investigation, prioritizing the avoidance of any potential risk, even if it means foregoing significant cost efficiencies. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive, independent validation study to assess the new packaging material's stability, compatibility, and impact on product efficacy across a range of simulated environmental conditions, and only proceed if it meets all Viatris quality standards and regulatory requirements. Option D. Implement the new packaging material, but instruct the sales team to proactively inform distributors about potential minor variations in product appearance that might arise. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the implementation of the new packaging material immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the quality control concerns are minor and can be addressed post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's desire for efficiency and cost reduction with the ethical obligation to maintain product quality and patient safety. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, and any decision impacting product integrity must be made with utmost care and adherence to established guidelines. The core of the dilemma lies in a potential conflict between financial objectives and the non-negotiable standards of pharmaceutical manufacturing and distribution. The correct approach involves a thorough, data-driven assessment of the proposed changes' impact on product quality and regulatory compliance, prioritizing patient safety above all else. This means meticulously reviewing the efficiency study's findings, cross-referencing them with Viatris's internal quality control protocols and relevant regulatory requirements, e.g., Good Manufacturing Practices (GMP), Good Distribution Practices (GDP). If any aspect of the proposed efficiency measures, such as changes in packaging materials or storage conditions, could potentially compromise product stability, efficacy, or safety, then these measures must be rejected or modified to ensure full compliance. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of pharmaceutical companies to protect public health and maintain the integrity of their products. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the efficiency study's recommendations without a comprehensive quality and regulatory review. This failure to scrutinize the potential impact on product integrity is a direct violation of regulatory mandates and ethical responsibilities. It prioritizes cost savings over patient well-being, which is unacceptable in the pharmaceutical industry. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the efficiency study entirely without proper consideration. While patient safety is paramount, a responsible company should also explore legitimate avenues for efficiency that do not compromise quality. Ignoring potential improvements without due diligence could be seen as a failure in operational management, though less severe than compromising safety. A third incorrect approach would be to seek regulatory loopholes or interpretations that allow for substandard practices. This is a clear ethical and regulatory breach, demonstrating a disregard for the spirit and intent of the law. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the full scope of the proposed changes and their potential implications. A structured decision-making process would involve 1. Clearly defining the objectives of the efficiency study and the proposed changes. 2. Conducting a rigorous risk assessment specifically focusing on product quality, patient safety, and regulatory compliance. 3. Consulting relevant internal experts, e.g., quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and external regulatory guidance. 4. Evaluating alternative solutions that achieve efficiency without compromising standards. 5. Documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them. 6. Ensuring transparency with regulatory bodies if any significant changes are contemplated that might affect product attributes. Question 19. Compliance review shows a recurring pattern of minor discrepancies between reported sales figures for a Viatris product in a specific region and the actual inventory depletion data. While individually small, the cumulative effect over several quarters suggests a potential overstatement of sales. As a Viatris employee involved in the review process, what is the most appropriate immediate action to take? Option A. Directly approach the regional sales manager to question the accuracy of their reported figures. Option B. Discuss the observed discrepancies with trusted colleagues in other departments to gauge their opinions. Option C. Overlook the discrepancies, assuming they are minor clerical errors that will self-correct over time. Option D. Immediately report the observed discrepancies to the Viatris Internal Compliance Department for investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed discrepancies to the Viatris Internal Compliance Department for investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create an environment where shortcuts are tempting, but adhering to ethical principles and regulatory frameworks is paramount for Viatris's reputation and legal standing. Careful judgment is needed to identify and address potential conflicts of interest and ensure that all business practices are transparent and compliant. The correct approach involves proactively reporting the observed discrepancy to the appropriate internal compliance department. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. By escalating the issue through established channels, the employee initiates a formal review process that can identify the root cause of the discrepancy and implement corrective actions. This aligns with Viatris's responsibility to maintain accurate financial reporting and comply with all relevant pharmaceutical industry regulations, which often mandate transparency and robust internal controls. An incorrect approach of ignoring the discrepancy is ethically and regulatorily unsound. It implies a disregard for accuracy and could lead to misstated financial reports, potentially violating securities laws and industry-specific regulations. Another incorrect approach, that of directly confronting the sales representative without involving compliance, risks misinterpretation, escalation of conflict, and could bypass established procedures for investigating such matters. This could also lead to the destruction of evidence or an incomplete understanding of the situation, hindering a proper investigation. Finally, an incorrect approach of discussing the issue informally with colleagues without reporting it to compliance fails to address the problem formally and could be seen as a breach of confidentiality or a failure to uphold professional duties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing potential ethical dilemmas, understanding the relevant company policies and external regulations, and utilizing established reporting channels for any suspected noncompliance. When faced with a situation like this, the professional should ask, does this action align with Viatris's code of conduct and applicable laws? What are the potential consequences of inaction or incorrect action? What is the most responsible and transparent way to address this issue? Question 20. Compliance review shows that a new promotional brochure for a Viatris medication contains data interpretations that, while not outright false, present a skewed perspective of the clinical trial results, potentially overstating the drug's efficacy compared to existing treatments. The marketing team is eager to distribute the brochure to healthcare providers. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately halt distribution of the brochure and initiate a comprehensive review by the medical affairs and regulatory departments to ensure all claims are accurate, balanced, and fully compliant with Viatris's internal policies and relevant regulations. Option B. Revise the brochure to slightly soften the language without a full review, assuming the current version is acceptable for initial distribution. Option C. Distribute the brochure as planned, as the interpretations are not explicitly false and the marketing team believes they are persuasive enough to drive product adoption. Option D. Proceed with the distribution of the brochure, but include a prominent disclaimer acknowledging that the data interpretations may be subject to ongoing scientific discussion. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt distribution of the brochure and initiate a comprehensive review by the medical affairs and regulatory departments to ensure all claims are accurate, balanced, and fully compliant with Viatris's internal policies and relevant regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to promote its products and the ethical obligation to ensure that promotional materials are accurate, balanced, and do not mislead healthcare professionals or patients. Viatris, as a pharmaceutical company, operates within a highly regulated environment where transparency and integrity in marketing are paramount. The challenge lies in navigating the fine line between persuasive marketing and the dissemination of potentially misleading information, especially when dealing with complex scientific data and the potential for off-label promotion. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves immediately halting the distribution of the promotional material and initiating a thorough review process. This demonstrates a commitment to accuracy and compliance. By proactively addressing the identified inaccuracies and ensuring that all future materials are vetted by the appropriate regulatory and medical affairs teams, Viatris upholds its responsibility to provide truthful and balanced information. This aligns with the core principles of pharmaceutical marketing regulations, which prioritize patient safety and informed decision-making by healthcare professionals. The regulatory framework mandates that promotional materials must be scientifically accurate, not misleading, and consistent with the approved product labeling. Distributing the material with a minor disclaimer, while seemingly a compromise, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It suggests an attempt to mitigate risk without fully rectifying the core issue of inaccuracy, potentially still exposing healthcare professionals to incomplete or misleading information. This approach fails to meet the standard of truthfulness and could be interpreted as a deliberate attempt to circumvent compliance. Ignoring the feedback and proceeding with distribution is the most egregious failure. This demonstrates a blatant disregard for regulatory requirements and ethical principles. It prioritizes commercial interests over patient safety and the integrity of scientific communication, exposing Viatris to severe legal and reputational consequences. Such an action would violate fundamental tenets of pharmaceutical marketing regulations, which are designed to prevent harm and ensure fair competition. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves a commitment to accuracy, transparency, and a proactive approach to identifying and rectifying potential issues. When faced with concerns about promotional materials, the process should involve 1. Acknowledging and investigating the feedback promptly. 2. Halting distribution of questionable materials pending review. 3. Engaging relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., medical affairs, legal, regulatory, to assess the accuracy and compliance of the material. 4. implementing corrective actions, which may include revising or withdrawing the material. 5. Reinforcing training and processes to prevent recurrence.